be much easier for everyday medical providers to offer those tests through their offices, through commercial labs such as LabCorp rather, or Quest, which they already normally use.
Test people then who have the symptoms and have some form of potential exposure but are under 50 without the underlying condition?
We're asking medical providers to use their clinical judgment about whether or not someone has already tested negative through the BioFire, and if their symptoms and the rest of their history gives them an indication that they should be tested.
Yeah, I'm going to try some more. Again, we're all dealing with a mysterious situation here, and everyone's concerned, but the numbers are really speaking powerfully to us. If you're under 50, you don't have the 5 pre-existing conditions, and throwing in if you're not a smoker or vapor, bless you. The chances are just so overwhelming that you're going to have only a mild form of this. That really has to be taken into account. But to the point that Dr. Barbeau made, you're still in touch with your healthcare provider, and if something unusual is in the mix, and the healthcare provider says, no, there's something going on here, I want that test for a specific reason, of course. But I think that the challenge here, which is really, I don't know, I'm not watching every TV show or reading every article, but I think the notion that this overwhelmingly, for most people, is very, very similar to a cold or flu, period, is still not fully getting through because of all the fear about the spread around the world, and obviously the pain of the most extreme cases. We got to help people to understand that for most people the impact is minimal. We want to help the folks who are most vulnerable first. So that's where the sense, there is some sense of triage eventually. As Dr. Barbeau said, we went from almost no local testing to now starting to have a substantial amount, but the number of cases is likely to go up intensely as well. At a certain point, the prioritization becomes ever more important.
But then didn't you order just a few days ago that city workers who traveled had to get tested, and now it sounds like you're saying they wouldn't even be eligible for testing?
Which specific, which piece are you looking at?
Educators and first responders.
Right, but it's not just travel. It's folks who we think need to be tested. It's across the board. If there's a specific reason, per the health commissioner, gives the health commissioner absolute latitude to determine in any specific case if someone needs to be tested in those categories. It is broad because it obviously includes community spread. Hold on a second. Yoav.
On the school closure policy that Cuomo announced today, I'm trying to understand what the purpose of a 24-hour closure would be, given that that the city doesn't think the virus kind of lingers on surfaces. Is it just for deep cleaning? And if so, I guess I'm trying to understand what that 24-hour closure would be.
Yeah, look, it's a regrouping opportunity, obviously. I'm a parent. I understand that parents are going to be this around. I'm going to say it, 1,000 times, and I hope all of you will amplify how much consistent experience is saying to us that children are not in danger unless they have those pre-existing conditions, God forbid. But nonetheless, many, many parents will only get some of that information, or they'll just be so scared for their kids, which is absolutely a basic human instinct, that they're going to be really worried if they hear there's a case in a school. So I think this is sort of a common sense measure. Time out. We're going to give people a lot of information. We're going to do the cleaning, which is abundance of caution, also I think reassuring to people. We're going to have the disease detectives identify if there are particular close contacts. Again, it's not that the kid walked down the hallway and there were 20 kids in the hallway. Was the child working very closely, intensely with a teacher or a tutor? Did the child have a best friend that they're always together and, constantly really close to each other? Those are the kinds of things we're going to be looking for. So I take that as a 24-hour kind of timeout where we get the information out, we do some of the work we have to do, and then any kid who needs to stay home, who's identified by the disease detectives, we do that. Obviously, if there are children in the school who have those pre-existing conditions, we want to alert parents so they can make their own choice. That might be, again, an abundance of caution dynamic for parents to say, let's hold kids back for a little period of time. That's the kind of thing that I think makes sense during that time frame. Anna.
Do you guys have an estimate for the number of people considered the most vulnerable? Folks over 50, those with those 5 underlying conditions? Do you have an estimate of how many sick residents?
Of total New Yorkers. Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't think we have it at our fingertips, but we can have it by tomorrow. Go ahead.
You had mentioned a city employee from Westchester who had no symptoms and still has no symptoms, but still got tested. Why did that city employee get tested? Are city employees required to be tested?
So let me separate those two concepts. And again, the executive order, or the commissioner's order, I'm sorry, is online. So anyone who wants to look at the provisions of it, it's there. Connection to the Westchester nexus. That's what the first words out of my mouth about that case, connection to the Westchester nexus, which has been obviously the core reality of this whole trajectory in the last week or two. So that's why the individual was tested. The commissioner's order says first responders, healthcare professionals, educators. That's where the commissioner retains the right to order testing.
Clarification. So the state guidance that Cuomo talked about today does apply to New York City schools as well?
Yes, we all work together on it, and we think it's good guidance.
20 cases in New York City, does that include the Westchester attorney? And I think
Guys, I'll try really hard to be consistent about the ground rules of the information for everyone's benefit. New York City residents. The numbers I'm going to give you are always New York City residents. As I said, we had the New Jersey guy who had been in New York City. We've had, obviously, the Westchester folks. But what our coin of the realm is going to be New York City residents.
Of the 20, how many people are in the hospital currently? I counted 5, but I just want to say...
I want to get you an up-to-date count because we have these 4 new cases we're still getting all the details on. There's been more out of the hospital than in the hospital, that much I can say. And again, we're going to start telling you about the people who are no longer of concern from the original set of cases. We'll start giving you more on that. But want to make sure that the... Oh, this is a technicality, Freddie. This is not helpful. Freddie has just confused everything. Let's get that straight and come back on that. But again, most people not hospitalized.
Yes. One, also clarification on the testing. So we know we've only had this capacity to test here for a week, but there was so much confusion before. I've heard from a lot of doctors and healthcare providers. They don't know how to get the test, where they were online, calling the health department, couldn't get through, just had the person go home and self-isolate. So when a person tests negative for the biofire, they can now conduct the test themselves, and they've been given that guidance. Can you just explain that?
For some journalists were here for other settings, other gatherings, others weren't. Explain the simplicity of the actual taking of the test.
So the health alert that went out today to all providers clearly lays out what providers can do in order to order that particular test through a commercial lab, and most physician offices have those capabilities. In terms of the actual test, as I have described it before, it's the equivalent of having a Q-tip up your nose, kind of probably further than you would feel comfortable with, swish it around, put it into a liquid medium, and then run it through an analyzer.
I think it was yesterday the commissioner used the now priceless phrase, a medical grade Q-tip, which sounds to me suspiciously like a regular Q-tip. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, just to be clear, on the Department of Health website, you are now counting the Westchester lawyer as a New York City case. Is that no longer, has that changed?
I think you are right, and that's, Freddie was also raising the point with what we're trying to do, and it's a fair point. That one was the origin for a lot of stuff. We're trying to do it based on residents because otherwise it's going to get kind of crazy if, for example, the guy in New Jersey was in here. We have people from Long Island who were in here. So we're trying to do it based on residents. But let me accept humbly that our definition may be a little gray there. And by tomorrow, I'd like to get us 100% tight that it's going to be residents. And if we vary from that, it'll be an asterisk and we'll clarify it.
My actual question for you, and I have a follow-up for Dr. Barbeau. There have been a couple public employees who have tested positive, and forgive me if this is in the commissioner's order, but what exactly does the city tell workers who have come in contact with a person who has tested positive or think they may have been in contact? What is the directive there?
The Commissioner can jump in. Every agency's been giving guidance to its employees on obviously all the precautions to take, and to the best of my understanding, on what to do in that scenario. And each agency has created its own guidance based on what the health department has told it.
So the guidance to city workers is the same as the guidance to any New Yorker. And our disease detectives, during the course of their contact tracing, as it's called, will determine with the individual who has been identified as a case who their close contacts are. And those close contacts may range from household contacts to individuals that spend a prolonged amount of time with him or her during their infectious period. So that then translates into making decisions about who should be tested in addition to the index case and who doesn't need to be tested. And so that guidance is the same for city workers as it is for city residents.
Person who thinks they have come in contact with someone who tested positive, do they tell their supervisor and then self-isolate? Like, what is the immediate, what are the immediate steps?
That, let's say, contact tree, if you will, originates from the individual who has been diagnosed with COVID-19. And so based on his or her history of who they came in contact with, what type of contact, how long the contact was, would then be the genesis for then determining who in addition to test.
The individual employee who say that their wife is positive, they don't then tell their workplace, like, you know, Department of Sanitation, oh, by the way, my wife is positive, what should I do?
So that's a different scenario, right? Because the index case is not the city worker, it's the worker's spouse. And so in that situation, the same thing holds. If the index case, we look at their close contacts, which would be their partner, and then if that index case was positive, the partner, whether or not they were positive or negative on the test, would be treated in isolation. They would be isolated for 14 days. And so we would then take additional history to determine whether or not there were any additional close contacts.
And then you said that it's not just prolonged.
Sorry, hold on 1 second. Don't go away. Just want to add on that. So, and I think it's fair to say we should go back over all the guidance. I think it's a very important scenario. Family member, make sure. I think it's self-evident that if a city employee had a family member in their home test positive, yes, that is something their supervisor should know. But the point I think that Dr. Barbeau is making is every case is being watched like a hawk right now by New York City and New York State. The disease detectives are making immediate contact. Even in an instance where somehow the supervisor didn't know, the health department's going to know. But I do think, to your question, it is very smart for supervisors to be alerted immediately in those cases, because we just want more information, and we should make that clear in the guidance.
Barbeau, you said it's not just the prolonged household contact as we initially thought, but other types of interactions. Can you just spell out what other types of interactions?
So they have ranged from close proximity and extended face-to-face contact, as would happen in, let's say, a lunch or an interview type of scenario. And so that we have seen in more than one case. And so that's why we are alerting New Yorkers that it's not just prolonged household contact. It can be prolonged contact that can be constituted by what I just described.
Let me be more graphic. Well, we have one case that we think we understand pretty well. Two people deep in conversation for a half hour. Animated conversation. The best thinking of the medical personnel is that in animated conversation, sometimes people project some saliva, and that may have been the contact. Obviously, another option is someone sneezed or coughed, like looking right at the person they were deep in conversation with. So that's the evolution, that is still close proximity, and you need that direct hit, with the exception again of right to the hand, right to the face, in fast proximity, because otherwise the virus just wouldn't live that long. But we do think this is an area of concern. It's not people in the stadium, it's not people in the big open area or a conference and all, it's people close up to each other, deeply engaging each other to the point that the inadvertent spitting that comes with a conversation sometimes, or a sneeze or a cough, directly goes at the other person in close proximity.